When I turned 65, I hosted a party for the family. No one showed up. That same day, my daughter-in-law posted pictures of everyone on a cruise. I just smiled. When they got back, I handed her a DNA test that made her go pale. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I spent 3 weeks preparing my 65th birthday party. 3 weeks picking the right menu, decorating the dining room with fresh flowers, and calling everyone to make sure they'd come. I even bought a new dress, navy blue with tiny pearl buttons, the kind Grant always said made me look classy. The table was set for 8 place cards written in my best penmanship. Grant, Sloan, little Caleb who just turned 7, sweet Hazel who's 5, my sister Evelyn, her husband Dean, and me at the head of the table where I could see all their faces as we celebrated together. By 6:30, no one had shown up. I checked my phone 3 times, thinking maybe I'd gotten the time wrong, but there it was, in my calendar. Birthday dinner, 6 p.m. I'd sent reminders to everyone just 2 days before. At 7 I called Grant, straight to voicemail. Then Sloane's phone, same thing, nothing. Evelyn didn't answer either, which was strange since she always picks up by the second ring. I stood in my dining room, staring at the untouched plates. The candles I'd lit an hour ago had burned down to stumps. The roast was going cold in the oven. The chocolate cake I'd spent all morning making sat perfect and uncut on the kitchen counter. Maybe there was traffic. Maybe something came up. Last minute, these things happen, I told myself, even though my chest felt tight and my hands wouldn't stop trembling. By 8 o'clock, I knew they weren't coming. I sat heavily in my chair, looking at the empty seats around me. This wasn't just lateness, this was something else entirely. The quiet in my house felt different. Not calm, but hollow, like the whole place was holding its breath. That's when I made the mistake of checking Facebook. Right there, at the top of my feed, was a photo that made my blood run cold. Sloane, glowing in a flowing white sundress, her arm around Grant, who was grinning wider than I'd seen in months. Behind them, the endless, deep blue of the ocean. The caption read, "Living our best life on the Mediterranean. So grateful for this amazing family getaway." I scrolled down. More photos. Caleb and Hazel building sandcastles on a perfect beach. Evelyn and Dean clinking glasses at what looked like a fancy ship's bar. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. The timestamp showed the photos were posted just an hour ago, while I was sitting here, waiting for them. They were thousands of miles away, sipping champagne and laughing at some sunset dinner on a cruise ship. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break, crack, like ice on a lake when it freezes too fast. They'd planned this, all of them. Sloane had put together a family trip that purposefully left me out, scheduled it for my birthday, and somehow talked everyone into going along. Even Evelyn, my own sister, who'd helped me pick out decorations for this party just last week. I stared at that photo until my eyes burned. Sloane's smile looked especially bright, almost smug. She was standing exactly where I should have been, at the center of my family, surrounded by the people who were supposed to love me most. My phone buzzed. A text from Grant. "Sorry, Mom, forgot to mention we'd be out of town this week. Sloane booked a surprise trip. Happy birthday though. Forgot to mention, like a Mediterranean cruise was something you just casually forgot to tell your mother about. Like planning it on my birthday was just a coincidence." I set the phone down slowly, afraid I'd throw it against the wall if I held it another second. The roast was cold now. I walked to the kitchen and turned off the oven. My movements felt mechanical and strange. It was like watching myself from outside my own body, seeing this lonely woman in a navy blue dress tidying up a dinner no one showed up for. I wrapped the cake in plastic wrap and slid it into the fridge, blew out the few candles still burning, then began stacking the good china back in the cabinet, each plate clinking too loudly in the silence of the house. Sloane had won something tonight, though I couldn't quite tell what game we'd been playing. For the first time in all my 65 years, I felt completely invisible. Not just ignored or forgotten, but erased. When I flipped off the dining room lights, I caught sight of my reflection in the dark window. I looked smaller, somehow, diminished. The woman staring back was the one who had kept the peace for decades, the one who smoothed over fights and remembered everyone's birthdays and anniversaries, the one who always put family first. And they'd all decided to spend my birthday acting like I didn't exist. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. Tomorrow, I'd have to deal with the aftermath, the fake apologies, the excuses about miscommunication. Sloane's sweet voice saying how the trip was booked months ago and nothing could be done. But tonight, I just needed to sit in this pain, really let it sink in, because deep down, I knew this wasn't only about a missed birthday dinner. It was about something bigger and much more intentional than I had let myself believe. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay in bed staring up at the ceiling while my mind ran through every family gathering over the last 5 years, realizing this birthday hadn't just been forgotten. It had been deliberately ruined. As the hours passed, more memories surfaced, each one sharper than the last. Caleb's 4th birthday party. I had been so excited to see him blow out the candles. But when I arrived, Sloane met me at the door with that perfect apologetic smile. "Oh, Marilyn, didn't Grant tell you we had to move the party to tomorrow? Little emergency," she said, but I could hear kids laughing inside, see balloons through the window. When I called Grant later, he sounded honestly confused. "Tomorrow? No, Mom. The party's definitely today." Sloane must have gotten the dates wrong. Hazel's first day of kindergarten. I asked Sloane 3 separate times what time they were dropping her off so I could come with my camera. "Oh, we're going really early," she'd told me. "Like 7 a.m., probably too early for you." When I showed up anyway, the teacher said Hazel had arrived at the regular time, 8:30. I missed her walking into her classroom, missed her shy little wave goodbye to Grant. Last Christmas, Sloane called 2 days before, her voice full of fake concern. "Marilyn, I hate to do this, but Grant's been really stressed with work. He asked if we could keep Christmas dinner small this year, just immediate family." I spent Christmas alone, reheating leftovers and watching old movies. Later, I found out from Evelyn they'd thrown a big party. She'd seen the pictures on Instagram. 20 people, including Grant's college buddies and several neighbors, everyone but me. Each memory was like a puzzle piece snapping into place, making a picture I had been too blind to see. This wasn't some string of innocent mistakes or scheduling mix-ups. This was planned, calculated. As the sun came up, I got out of bed and made coffee, my hands still shaking from exhaustion and something else, a growing sense of dread. I picked up my phone and began scrolling through Sloane's social media posts from the past year, really paying attention for the first time. There she was at Caleb's school play, sitting in the front row beside Grant. I'd asked about that play specifically, and she'd told me it was canceled because of a flu outbreak. There she was at Hazel's dance recital. The one Sloane had called just a practice session, nothing worth attending. Photo after photo of family moments I'd been left out of, each one captioned with words about precious family memories and blessed to have these people in my life. The harshest part was how effortless it all looked. Sloane's arm around Grant, the kids gathered close to their parents, everyone smiling like they belonged, like they were whole without me. I put the phone down and walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the garden I'd planted when Grant was just a boy. He used to help me weed those flower beds, his little hands so careful with the fragile stems. When had I lost him? When had he stopped seeing me as essential to his happiness? The answer came to me with painful clarity. When Sloane came into our lives, before her, Grant called me twice a week. We had dinner together every other Sunday. He'd ask me for advice about work, tell me stories from his day. He was my son, my friend, my connection to the future I'd helped build. Sloane shifted that, slowly, so gradually, I didn't see it happening until it already had. First, the Sunday dinners became once a month. Sloane's been planning these big meals, Grant explained. She loves having me to herself on weekends. Then the calls dwindled to obligatory holiday check-ins. "Sorry, Mom, can't talk long." Sloane's got the day packed. She never said anything outright against me. That would have been too obvious, too easy to counter. Instead, she worked in the quiet spaces between words, in the silences after her suggestions. "Your mom seems tired these days. Maybe we shouldn't burden her with the kids this weekend. I saw your mom at the store yesterday. She looked a little confused about something. Do you think she's okay living by herself?" Little hints that I was becoming a burden, a worry, someone to manage, not include. I thought about the way she hugged me at family events, always just a little too long, her hand on my back like I was some fragile elderly relative who needed comforting instead of an equal, the way she'd cut in when I talked to the kids, pulling their focus elsewhere. "Grandma Marilyn's had a long day, sweeties. Why don't you show Daddy your new toy?" And Grant, my sweet, trusting boy, absorbed it all without question. He started looking at me like she did, with affection and pity, like I was something precious but fading. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. Grant's name lit up the screen. "Hi, Mom." His voice was bright, easy in a way that made my chest tighten. "Just wanted to call and say happy belated birthday. Sorry we missed it, but this trip has been amazing. Sloan really knocked it out of the park with the planning." I clenched the phone. "Yes, I saw the photos. Oh good. Sloan's been posting like crazy. The kids are having so much fun. Caleb learned to snorkel yesterday, and Hazel met this little girl from Boston. You would have loved seeing them, would I? Because from where I stood, it seemed like nobody even noticed I wasn't there. The trip was kind of last minute," I said carefully. "I know, right? Sloan found this awesome deal and just went for it. That's one of the things I love about her. Spontaneous. That's what he called purposefully booking a cruise right on his mother's birthday." "Grant," I began, then stopped. What could I say? That his wife was pulling the strings, that she'd spent years quietly cutting me out of his life. He'd say I was jealous, bitter, unwilling to accept that he'd grown up and moved on. Maybe I was all of that, but I was also right. "Everything okay, Mom? You sound off." I shut my eyes, feeling the weight of all those lost moments, all those times I'd been erased from my own family's story. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just tired." "Well, get some rest. We'll be back next week, and I promise we'll plan something special to make up for missing your birthday." Another promise from Grant that Sloan would manage to break. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, watching the light shift as morning bled into afternoon. I thought about the years ahead. More birthdays spent alone, more grandchildren's milestones missed, more family pictures where I was so absent it was like I'd never existed at all. For the first time since my husband died 8 years ago, I felt truly orphaned. Not by death this time, but by something even worse. By the cold, intentional erasure of my place in the only family I had left. But as the heat rose in my chest, sharp and bright, I realized something else. I wasn't going to fade away quietly. If Sloan wanted to play games, she'd picked the wrong rival. I'd raised Grant when his father walked out. I'd worked 2 jobs to put him through college, gave up my own dreams to make sure he had every chance. I'd earned my place in this family, and I wasn't giving it up without a fight. I just needed to figure out what I was really fighting. It was Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after my forgotten birthday, when the doorbell rang. I was still in my robe, nursing my second cup of coffee, staring at the stack of thank you cards I'd bought for a party that never happened. The sound made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone, and honestly, unexpected visitors had become rare in my carefully controlled little world. Through the peephole, I saw a man I didn't know, mid-40s maybe, dark hair and worry lines carved deep around his eyes. He was well-dressed but disheveled, like he'd been traveling. His hands were shoved deep in his coat pockets, and he kept glancing around like he wasn't sure he should even be there. I almost didn't answer. After the cruise incident, I wasn't in the mood for salesmen or missionaries or whoever this was, but something about how tense he looked, like just standing there took everything he had, made me curious. "Can I help you?" I called through the door. "Mrs. Carter." His voice was careful, hesitant. "Marilyn Carter, Grant's mother." My chest tightened. How did this stranger know my son's name? Who's asking? He was quiet for a moment, then said something that made my blood run cold. "My name is Adrian Blake. I need to talk to you about Sloan." I opened the door slowly, keeping the chain in place. "What about Sloan?" Adrian Blake looked even more uneasy up close. His hands were shaking a little, and there were dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. "This is going to sound crazy, Mrs. Carter, but I think my son might be living in your son's house." The chain suddenly felt heavy in my hand. "What are you talking about?" "Caleb," he said, and the name hit me like a punch. The little boy, 7 years old, brown hair, scar on his chin from falling off his bike when he was 4. I stared at him, my mind spinning. Caleb did have a scar on his chin. Grant had told me about the bike accident, how scared they'd been rushing him to the ER. But how would this man know that? "I think you'd better come in," I said, my voice just a whisper. Adrian Blake sat on my couch like he might bolt at any second. I offered him coffee, but he shook his head. His hands were clenched so tight in his lap, his knuckles had gone white. "I don't know where to begin," he said. "This is going to sound crazy. Try me. I've had a pretty weird week." He drew a shaky breath. Meadow and I, we were together for 2 years before she met your son, before she got married. We lived together, talked about getting married, and then she got pregnant. My coffee cup suddenly felt too heavy. I set it down carefully, afraid I'd drop it. I was so happy, Adrian went on, his voice thick with old pain. I wanted to marry her right away, start building our life together, but Meadow kept putting me off, said she needed time, wasn't ready for such a big step. Then one day I came home from work and she was gone, just gone. All her stuff, everything, like she'd never been there at all. Did you look for her? Of course I did, for months. Filed a missing person report, hired a private investigator, posted on every social media platform. Nothing. It was like she vanished into thin air. He rubbed his face with both hands. The investigator finally told me to give up, said some people just don't want to be found. I was starting to feel sick. What does this have to do with Caleb? 3 months ago, I was at a conference in Austin. Just walking downtown during luncheon, I saw them, Meadow and a little boy who looked exactly like me at that age. Same eyes, same chin, even the same way he tilted his head when he focused. I followed them for 3 blocks, Mrs. Carter. I watched that little boy, and I knew he was mine. The room started spinning. You're saying Caleb is your son. I'm saying, I think he is. Sloane was about 2 months pregnant when she left me. If she carried 2 term, he'd be exactly Caleb's age now. Adrian reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Look at this dot. He showed me a photo of himself as a child, maybe 6 or 7. The resemblance to Caleb was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw, even the same slight gap between his front teeth that Caleb always tried to hide when he smiled. My hands were shaking now. This could be a coincidence. Lots of kids look alike, that's what I told myself at first. But then I started digging. Adrian's voice hardened, more determined. I hired another investigator, a better one this time. Sloane Parker. That's not even her real name, by the way. Her real name is Margaret Winters, and she's done this before. Done what before? Disappeared when things got complicated. Left men when they started asking too many questions. The investigator found 2 other guys, Mrs. Carter, 2 other men who had relationships with her that ended the same way. Suddenly, completely like she'd never existed. Adrian leaned closer, his eyes intense. One of them thinks she might have been pregnant when she left him too. I felt like I was drowning. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because I've been watching from a distance for 3 months, trying to figure out what to do, trying to decide if I had the right to upend a kid's life over suspicions and coincidences. His voice cracked. But then I saw the photos from your cruise. The happy family trip, everyone smiling and laughing. And I realized something that made me sick. What you weren't in any of the photos. I went through all of Sloane's social media, Mrs. Carter, hundreds of pictures, family gatherings, birthdays, holidays. Caleb and Hazel appear in every single one. Your son Grant shows up in most, but you, it's like you barely exist, as if you're being erased from your own family's narrative. The realization hit me hard, almost like a punch. I thought about all the events I'd missed, all those last-minute changes and conveniently muddled messages. All the times I felt like an outsider peeking into what should have been my family. My mind wandered to my own experience with Sloane. Adrian went on. How she cut me off from friends and family toward the end. How she made me believe I was the issue. That I was too needy, too much. How she convinced me that people who truly cared just didn't understand us. She's doing the same thing to Grant, I whispered. I think so. And I think she's doing it to you, too. Which means if Caleb really is my son, he's not the only one she's hurt. You are, too. Adrian reached into his coat and pulled out a manila envelope. This is why I came here, Mrs. Carter. Why I finally got up the nerve to knock on your door. What is it? DNA test results. I got a sample of Caleb's hair from the barber shop where Sloane takes him. Had it tested against mine. His hands shook as he passed me the envelope. I got the results yesterday. I stared at it, too afraid to even touch it. Inside could be the truth that would either destroy my family or save it. And I couldn't tell which. Before you open that, Adrian said softly, I want you to understand something else. I don't want to take Caleb from the only dad he's ever known. I don't want to traumatize him or turn his life upside down. But I can't sit here and let Sloane keep lying and manipulating everyone who loves him, you included. What are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to help me make sure he's protected. From her. From whatever she's been doing to all of us. Adrian's voice grew firmer. Now, unwavering, because if she lied about this, Mrs. Carter, what else has she lied about? And who else will she hurt? I looked at the envelope in my hands, feeling its weight, the weight of the truth I hadn't wanted but couldn't ignore. Outside, a car door slammed and kids laughed as they passed the house. The sounds of an ordinary afternoon in an ordinary neighborhood, where mothers didn't steal children and grandmothers didn't vanish from family albums. But my life hadn't been ordinary for a long time. I just didn't want to see it. Mrs. Carter. Adrian's tone softened, almost kind. Are you ready to know the truth? I pictured Caleb's sweet little face, the way he used to run to me with his arms wide before Sloane started discouraging that kind of affection. I thought of Hazel, who hardly knew me anymore because I'd been cut out of so much of her world. I thought of Grant, my son, slowly turned against his own mother. I thought of my lonely birthday party and all those family photos where I simply didn't exist. Yes, I said, and opened the envelope. The DNA results stared back at me in cold, clinical language, 99.7% probability of paternity. The numbers blurred as I read them over and over, hoping somehow they'd shift, hoping this was some twisted mistake or cruel prank. Caleb wasn't Grant's son, the little boy who took his first steps into my arms, who I helped teach to tie his shoes, who I read bedtime stories to when he could still curl up in my lap. He wasn't my blood at all. And Grant, my devoted son, who'd named Caleb after his own grandfather, didn't know he'd been raising someone else's child. I'm sorry, Adrian said softly. He stayed seated on my couch, watching as I absorbed it all. I know this must be devastating. I placed the papers down, my hands shaking uncontrollably. How long have you known for certain? Since yesterday. But I've had a feeling for months. He grabbed his phone again, showing me more pictures. Surveillance shots, clearly taken from afar. Caleb playing in a park. Caleb walking into a school. Caleb riding his bike down what looked like my street. I've been keeping tabs on them sometimes. I know how that sounds, but I needed to be sure. You've been watching my family. I've been watching my son, Adrian said firmly, his voice steady but not aggressive, and trying to figure out what kind of woman could take a child and build her entire world around a lie. That's when the anger hit me, blazing and unbearable. Not at Adrian. He was just as much a victim as anyone else, but at Sloane, at the scope of her betrayal, the coldness of it. She hadn't just lied about who Caleb's father was. She had built her whole marriage on that lie, used an innocent kid as the cornerstone of a life she never deserved. She trapped Grant. I said the words sharp and acidic. She got pregnant by another man and used that baby to lock down a marriage with my son. That's what it looks like. Adrian's face was grim. The timeline lines up perfectly. She left me when she was about 2 months along, just starting to show. If she acted fast, found someone right away, she could have convinced him the baby was premature or just small. I thought back to when Caleb was born, how excited Grant had sounded when he called to say Sloane was in labor. He arrived 3 weeks early. I remembered. Grant had been worried. Something was wrong. But the doctor assured him everything was fine. Because everything was fine, Caleb wasn't early. He was right on time, for my timeline, not Grant's. The pieces fit together now with a sickening clarity. Sloane's whirlwind romance with my son, the lightning-fast engagement, the wedding that took place barely half a year after they met. I'd thought it was sweet at the time, love conquering everything. Now, I saw it for what it was. Something planned. She needed a father for Caleb before he arrived, I said. Someone stable. Someone who wouldn't look too hard at the dates. Someone trusting, Adrian added. Someone who'd never ask for a paternity test because it would never even cross his mind. That was Grant to a T. My son had always been painfully honest, too good at seeing the best in people to suspect the worst. He believed whatever you told him. It was one of his finest traits, and Sloane had used it against him. There's more, Adrian said, and the weight in his voice made my stomach knot. The investigator I hired uncovered more about Sloane. Things that might explain why she's been trying so hard to push you away. What things? Adrian handed me a folder. Inside were photos, papers, what appeared to be copies of official forms. Her actual name is Margaret Winters. She's 34, not 31, like she told your son. She grew up in foster care, aged out at 18. No family, no real ties anywhere. I looked at a photo that seemed to come from a high school yearbook. The face was clearly Sloane, just younger, harsher somehow. Her hair was different, darker, and there was something in her eyes I'd never noticed in the woman who married my son, a kind of desperate hunger. She's been married before, Adrian went on, twice. Once to a man named Julian Cole in Nevada, once to someone named Spencer Hayes in Oregon. Both marriages ended in divorce in under 2 years. Both times she walked away with hefty alimony. She's done this before, I whispered. The pattern's always the same. She finds a man with money or stability, moves fast to secure him, then methodically cuts him off from his support network, friends, family, anyone who might see through her or ask questions. I thought of how Grant's college friends slowly stopped visiting after he married Sloane, how he drifted from his coworkers, how he hardly talked about his job anymore except to say it was stressful, how he leaned more and more on Sloane for social ties, for emotional support, for everything. She's been isolating him, I said, and you, because you're the biggest threat to her, hold. Mothers notice what others miss. They ask questions. They remember what life was like before she showed up. Adrian leaned in, his eyes sharp. She needed you gone, Mrs. Carter. Not just pushed aside, completely erased. That's why the ruined birthday party. That's why the missed invitations and crossed wires. She's been conditioning your family to operate without you. The meanness of it stole my breath. But why? If she already had Grant, if he thought Caleb was his son, why work so hard to cut me out? Because you know the timeline. You remember when they met, when she got pregnant, when Caleb was born. If you started connecting dates, you might have uncovered the truth. Adrian's voice stayed low but firm. She had to make you irrelevant before you became dangerous. I shot up suddenly, pacing to the window where I could see the street where Caleb learned to ride his bike. The little boy I'd cheered for, patched up when he fell, celebrated every milestone with. He was still the same child, still sweet and funny and bright. But everything about his place in our family was built on a lie. What about Hazel? I asked, already afraid of the answer. Far as I can tell, Hazel really is Grant's daughter, born 2 years after Caleb, during a time when Sloane and your son were definitely together. But Mrs. Carter, Adrian paused. What Hazel's birth may have been planned too, a way to make sure Grant never questioned Caleb. If she gave him a biological child, he'd be less likely to doubt that Caleb was his as well, and it would lock them together even tighter. My stomach turned. Everything about my son's marriage, his family, his life these last 7 years, had been crafted by a woman who saw him not as someone to love, but as a resource to exploit, and she'd used children, innocent children, as tools in her manipulation. Caleb doesn't know, does he? I asked. Of course not. He's 7 years old. As far as he's concerned, Grant is his father and always has been. And Hazel. She doesn't know either. She just thinks she has a big brother who looks different from her. Kids don't question these things, but adults did. Or they should, and I was starting to understand why Sloane had worked so hard to make me irrelevant. A grandmother who spent time with her grandchildren, who was really present in their lives, might eventually notice that Caleb looked nothing like his supposed father, might start asking questions about family resemblances, about genetic traits that didn't add up. Adrian, I said slowly, why did you decide to tell me this now? You could have just demanded a paternity test, gone through the courts, tried to get custody. Why involve me? He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands, because I realized something when I saw those cruise photos. Sloane isn't just destroying my relationship with my son, she's destroying yours too, and if we don't stop her, she's going to keep doing it to other people. What do you mean? She's already starting to pull back from Grant's friends, from his work colleagues, making him more and more dependent on her for everything. And she's teaching the kids to see him as the only parent who really matters. Caleb barely talks about you anymore when I've watched them at the park. It's like she's erasing you from his memory. The truth of that hit me like a physical blow. I thought about how different Caleb had become in recent months, how he'd stopped running to hug me when I visited, how he'd started looking to Sloane for permission before talking to me. I thought he was just growing up, becoming more independent, but maybe it was something else entirely. She's going to discard Grant eventually, Adrian continued. Just like she discarded me, just like she discarded her previous husbands. But first, she's going to make sure he has nothing left except her and the kids. No friends, no family, no support system. When she's ready to move on, he'll be completely alone. I closed my eyes, seeing my son's future stretched out before him, isolated, abandoned, probably broke, if Sloane was as calculating as she appeared to be, and the children, caught in the middle of it all, used as pawns in a game they didn't even know they were playing. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Adrian stood up, gathering his papers and photos. "I want you to help me save our family, both of us, because that's what we are, Mrs. Carter. Family. You're Caleb's grandmother in every way that matters, even if we don't share DNA. And I'm not going to let Sloane destroy that just because she's afraid of the truth." He handed me a business card with his contact information. "Think about it, but don't think too long. They'll be back from their cruise in a few days. And when they are, Sloane's going to be watching for any sign that you're becoming a problem again. If we're going to act, it has to be soon." After Adrian left, I sat in my living room holding the DNA results and staring at that business card. Outside, the afternoon was fading into evening, and the house felt quieter than ever. But for the first time in months, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt like the calm before a storm, because Sloane Parker, or Margaret Winters, or whatever her real name was, had made a critical mistake. She thought she could erase me completely, make me irrelevant to my own family's story. But I wasn't gone yet, and now that I knew what she really was, I wasn't going anywhere. I called Grant 3 days after the family got back from their cruise. My voice was calm, rehearsed. I'd gone over this conversation in my head at least a dozen times. "Hi, sweetheart. I was wondering if we could all have dinner together this weekend. I have something important I'd like to talk about with you and Sloane." There was a pause on the line. "Is everything okay, Mom? You sound serious." "Everything's fine. I just think it's time we had a real family talk. About us. About what's ahead. I've been thinking a lot while you were gone." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear Sloane talking faintly in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. When Grant came back, his tone was more careful. "Sloane wants to know what kind of talk. She's worried you might be upset about the cruise timing." Of course she was worried. Sloane had good instincts. She could probably feel something had shifted, even over the phone. "Tell Sloane I'm not upset about anything. I just think it's good for families to be honest with each other. Don't you? Saturday evening would be great. I'll cook. Let me check with Sloane and call you back." The fact that my 38-year-old son had to ask his wife before having dinner with his own mother would have been funny if it hadn't been so sad. But I kept my tone light. "Of course. Just let me know." He called back 2 hours later. "Saturday works, 6 o'clock. Perfect. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone." That was Thursday. I spent Friday getting ready for what I knew would be the most important conversation of my life. Adrian and I had met twice more since his first visit, carefully planning how to reveal the truth in a way that would protect Caleb while exposing Sloane's lies. The DNA results were tucked into a manila folder on my kitchen counter, along with the investigator's documents. Margaret Winter's real name, her past marriages, the timeline proving Caleb couldn't possibly be Grant's biological son. Everything we needed to tear down the lies Sloane had built her life on. I made Grant's favorite dinner, pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes and the green beans he'd loved since he was a boy. If this was going to be the last family dinner we ever had, I wanted it to be memorable, for the right reasons, at least at first. Saturday evening came gray and rainy. Typical October weather. I set the dining room table with my best china, the same set I'd planned to use for my birthday 2 weeks ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. They showed up right at 6, looking innocent, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. She looked like the perfect wife and mother. Someone who couldn't possibly lie. Caleb ran in first, full of 7-year-old energy and joy. "Grandma Marilyn, I learned to swim on the cruise. Want to see me do the doggy paddle?" My heart ached as I hugged him, knowing what I was about to say would change everything for this sweet child. "Maybe after dinner, sweetheart. Go wash your hands." Hazel followed more quietly, holding a little doll with messy hair. At 5, she was more timid than her brother, more hesitant around me since Sloane had started discouraging their affection. But she still let me kiss her forehead before trailing after Caleb to the bathroom. Grant hugged me warmly, and for a moment, I could pretend this was just a regular family dinner. "Something smells incredible, Mom. I've missed your cooking." "You looked tired," I noted. He did. There were fresh lines around his eyes, and he'd lost weight. "Work's been brutal lately. The mergers got everyone stressed." He glanced at Sloane, who was scanning my living room like she was identifying flaws. But Sloan keeps telling me I need to find a better work-life balance. Stress is so bad for your health, Sloan said, appearing beside us with that rehearsed smile. I keep encouraging Grant to consider early retirement. We could travel more, spend more time with the children. Early retirement at 38. Another way to make Grant completely dependent on her, stripping him of his professional identity and income. I smiled back politely. How wonderful that you're thinking about the future. That's actually connected to what I wanted to talk about tonight. During dinner, I kept the mood light. The children chattered about their cruise adventures, and Sloan played the perfect mom, cutting Caleb's meat and reminding Hazel to use her napkin. She was skilled at this act. Warm, attentive, entirely convincing. But I noticed things I'd missed before. How she interrupted when Caleb began a story about missing me while they were away. How she redirected Hazel when the little girl asked why I hadn't joined them on the trip. How she subtly managed every exchange, steering the conversation and affection. After the kids finished eating, I suggested they play in the living room while the adults talked. Sloan quickly objected. Oh, they should probably get ready to go soon. Tomorrow's a school day, and we like to keep their routine consistent. This won't take long, I said firmly, and I think what I have to share might impact their routine quite a bit. Something flickered on Sloan's face, just for a moment, but I caught it. Fear. When the kids were settled with their toys in the next room, I returned to the dining room where Grant and Sloan waited. The manila folder lay on the table by my coffee cup like a loaded gun. So, Grant said, reaching for Sloan's hand across the table, what did you want to talk about? I took a breath, feeling the weight of it. I wanted to talk about honesty, about family, about the importance of knowing who we really are. Sloan's smile tightened just slightly. That's a little philosophical for dinner conversation, is it? I don't think so. I picked up the manila folder, feeling both of them stiffen. You see, I've learned some interesting things recently about family history, about genetics, about the importance of medical records and accurate information. Mom, Grant said slowly, what's in the folder? The truth. I opened it and pulled out the DNA results, laying them on the table between us. These are the results of a paternity test for Caleb. The silence that followed was deafening. Grant stared at the papers like they might catch fire. Sloan went very still, her face carefully blank. A paternity test. Grant's voice was barely audible. Why would you, ... How did you? The test shows that you are not Caleb's biological father, I said softly. There's a 99.7% probability that another man is his father, a man named Adrian. Blake. Sloan stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. Marilyn, I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing, but ... Sit down, Margaret. The use of her real name hit like a punch. She actually stumbled back, her face draining of color. Grant looked between us, confusion and growing horror fighting for control of his expression. Margaret, Mom, what's going on? I pulled out the investigator's report, the marriage certificates, the timeline documentation. Sloan's real name is Margaret Winters. She's been married twice before, and she has a pattern of lying about her identity and her past. She was involved with Adrian Blake before she met you, Grant. She left him when she was pregnant with his child and came to find a new father for her baby. That's not true, Sloan said, her voice trembling now. Grant, don't listen to this. Your mother has obviously had some kind of breakdown. Caleb was born 7 months after you two met, I pressed on. You thought he was premature, but he wasn't. He was born right on time for the timeline of Sloan's relationship with Adrian. Grant picked up the DNA results with shaking hands. I watched his face as he read them, watched the color drain from his cheeks as the numbers sank in. This can't be right, he whispered. Adrian Blake has been looking for his son for 7 years, I said. He found you 3 months ago and has been watching from a distance, trying to decide what to do. He came to me because he recognized what Sloan was doing to our family, the same isolation tactics she used on him. Sloan was backing toward the doorway now, her perfect composure completely gone. Grant, please, don't let her poison you against me. Think about our life together. Our family. Our family. Grant's voice was raw, broken. Our family that's built on a lie. Our son, who isn't actually our son. He is your son, in every way that matters. You raised him. You love him. Based on a lie. Grant slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes jump. Everything, Sloan. Everything has been a lie. From the living room came the sound of children's laughter. innocent and bright. Caleb and Hazel, playing their games, unaware their world was falling apart in the next room. "There's more," I said quietly, pulling out the records of Sloane's previous marriages. "She's done this before. Found men, married them quickly, isolated them from their families, then moved on when it suited her. You're not her first victim, Grant. You're just the most successful one." Grant stared at the documents, his breathing shallow and fast. "The cruise," he said suddenly. "Your birthday. That wasn't a coincidence, was it?" Sloane said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. "You planned it deliberately. You made sure Mom would be alone on her birthday while we were all together, having fun without her. You wanted to hurt her." "I wanted to protect our family," Sloane started. "From what?" "From my mother. From the woman who raised me and loved me and would never hurt anyone. From someone who would eventually figure out the truth," I said softly. "That's what this has all been about, Grant. The missed events, the last-minute changes, the gradual separation from your friends and family. Sloane needed to isolate you completely before you started, asking questions she couldn't answer." Grant looked up at his wife who wasn't who she claimed to be, whose entire life with him was built on lies. "Is any of it real? Do you love me at all? Or was I just convenient?" For the first time since I'd known her, Sloane had no answer, no smooth deflection, no manipulation, no perfectly crafted response. She just stood there, exposed and silent. That silence told us everything we needed to know. From the living room, Caleb called out, "Daddy, can we have ice cream?" Grant closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slip down his cheek. "What do I tell them?" he whispered. "How do I explain this to the children?" "We'll figure it out," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Together, as a family." "But Caleb is still your son in every way that matters. That doesn't change. But he also has a biological father who loves him and wants to be part of his life. And maybe, if we handle this right, that can be a good thing." Sloane turned toward the door, but I called after her. "Margaret." She stopped but didn't turn around. "Adrian isn't going to disappear this time. And neither am I. If you try to run with the children, we'll find you. If you try to manipulate this situation or hurt these kids to protect yourself, we'll stop you. Your days of controlling this family are over." She left without saying anything else, leaving behind the laughter of kids outside and the ruins of 7 years of deception. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like my family was slipping away. I felt like I was finally reclaiming it. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen making Sunday dinner when the front door opened and Caleb's voice rang out. "Grandma, we brought dessert." "In here, sweetheart," I answered, smiling as little feet came pounding toward me. Caleb barreled into the kitchen, hugging a bakery box almost too big for him. Hazel followed more carefully, carrying a small bunch of daisies. "These are for you," she said softly, handing me the flowers. "Daddy said yellow is your favorite color." I crouched down to take them, pulling her into a hug she didn't hesitate to return. "They're perfect, sweetheart. Thank you." Grant appeared at the doorway, looking healthier than he had in years. The weight he'd lost during his last months with Sloane had come back, and the stress lines around his eyes had faded. Adrian stood just behind him, still a little cautious at family gatherings, but finding his way in our new, messy family. "Something smells amazing," Grant said, kissing my cheek. "Is that your famous apple pie?" "Caleb specifically asked for it," I said, ruffling his hair. "With mashed potatoes and that chicken you used to love, the one with the herbs." Caleb's eyes lit up. "Yes, that's my favorite too. Just like Daddy's." Hearing him call both Grant and Adrian Daddy still caught me off guard, but the kids had adapted to their bigger family the way kids often do. Caleb called Grant Daddy and Adrian Daddy Dave, while Hazel just accepted that Caleb had 2 dads, like some of her friends had 2 homes. Adrian set a bottle of wine on the counter, still tentative in what used to be Sloane's kitchen. "How can I help?" "You can set the table," I said. "The good china is in the dining room cabinet." Getting here had taken months. Months of therapy, quiet talks with the kids, and legal steps that finally ended when Sloane agreed to give up custody to avoid charges for fraud. She vanished again, just like she'd left Adrian 7 years earlier, but this time, she left the kids behind. It wasn't an easy transition. Caleb was confused and hurt by his mother's sudden exit. Despite everything she'd done, Hazel was clingy and anxious, scared more people she loved might leave. We all had nights of crying, anger, and no sleep. But we started to heal. Grant moved back into the house he'd shared with Sloane, but it felt completely different now. The heavy air of secrets and tiptoeing was gone. Adrian got an apartment 10 minutes away, close enough to be here every day, but far enough to give everyone room to breathe. "Grandma," Caleb said, tugging my apron, "can I tell you a secret?" I knelt down to him. "Of course you can." He cupped his hands and whispered, "I'm glad you found Daddy Dave. Now I have the most daddies of anyone in my class." My chest tightened with love for this brave boy who turned a messy situation into something to be proud of. "I'm glad too, sweetheart, and I'm glad Mommy Sloane went away," he added more quietly. "She was always mad about something." It hurt me that a 7-year-old had noticed the tension at home so clearly, but it also told me we'd made the right decisions. Kids always know more than we think. And even if he couldn't name it, Caleb had felt his mom's manipulation. While we ate dinner, the adults chatted easily as the kids laughed about school and friends. Adrian mentioned Caleb's latest soccer game, where he scored his first goal. Grant talked about how excited Hazel was to start dance classes. We talked like the family we'd become, maybe unconventional, but real in a way Sloane's carefully crafted version never was. "I got a call from my lawyer yesterday," Grant said as we cleared the dishes. "The divorce is finally final." "How do you feel about that?" I asked. He paused, watching Caleb help Adrian with the dishwasher. "Relieved mostly, and thankful it's over without hurting the kids more." "Any regrets about ending the marriage?" "No. About not seeing the truth sooner." He shrugged. "I think I'll always regret that. How much time we lost. How much pain she caused you, especially." I squeezed his shoulder. "You can't blame yourself for trusting someone you loved. That's not a flaw, Grant. That's just being human." Adrian joined us at the counter, drying his hands on a dish towel. "Has there been any word from her?" "Nothing," Grant said. "Her lawyer said she doesn't want any contact with the kids. No visits, no calls, nothing. That's probably for the best," I said, though it still amazed me how a mother could walk away so completely. "At least now, the kids can heal without worrying. She'll show up and append everything again." Later, after the kids fell asleep watching a movie in the living room, the three of us sat around my kitchen table with coffee and leftover pie. These quiet evenings had become some of my favorite times. Planning ahead, talking through the challenges of co-parenting in such an unusual way. "I've been thinking about something," Adrian said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "About Caleb's last name." Grant looked up quickly. "What about it?" "He's been Carter his whole life. That's his name, his records, everything. I don't want to change that, but I was wondering." Adrian paused, then went on, "Would it be okay if I took your name too? Officially. I mean, Adrian Carter Blake. That way Caleb and I would share part of a name, but he'd still be tied to you and your family." The thoughtfulness of it, how much care he put into honoring everyone's place in Caleb's life, brought tears to my eyes. Grant looked stunned. "You'd do that?" "I want Caleb to know that families can be complicated without being broken," Adrian said. "I want him to see that loving someone doesn't mean you have to pick sides or pretend other relationships don't matter." Grant reached across and shook his hand. "I think that's perfect." As the night wrapped up and Adrian got ready to take the kids to his place for their overnight visit, I pulled him aside. "Thank you," I said softly. "For what?" "For saving my family. For being brave enough to tell me the truth when it would have been easier to disappear again." Adrian paused, watching Caleb grab his backpack and stuffed animal. "You know what I realized that day I showed up at your door? I wasn't just losing my son. You were losing your family too. Sloane was taking all of us away from each other, little by little, but we stopped her. We did." He smiled, and for the first time since I met him, it reached all the way to his eyes. "And look what we built instead." I glanced around my home, at the kids' drawings taped to the fridge, at Hazel's forgotten sweater tossed over a chair, at the family photos that now included Adrian and really showed who we were. It wasn't the family I'd pictured when Grant first got married, but it was so much better than the empty performance Sloane had staged. After everyone left, I sat in the living room with a mug of tea, thinking about how much my life had shifted since that painful birthday 6 months back. The house that once felt like a tomb now buzzed with the sounds of family life. Kids, laughter, Adrian's careful questions about family traditions, Grant's relieved chatter about his future plans. My phone lit up with a text from Grant. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. The kids are asking if we can do this every Sunday." I told them that was up to Grandma. I typed back. Every Sunday sounds perfect. This is what families do. His reply came fast. Yes, this is what real families do. I set the phone down and looked at the framed picture on the side table. A shot from last month's trip to the zoo, all 5 of us crammed together in front of the elephants. Caleb sat on Adrian's shoulders while Hazel clung to my hand. Grant stood between us, one arm around me and the other around Adrian, smiling like he'd just remembered what joy felt like. We looked like what we really were, a family that had been broken and pieced back together in a new way, stronger and more honest, not traditional, but real, not flawless, but true. The house settled as the night came on, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive with possibility, full of the love Sloane had tried so hard to snuff out but never could. I'd thought my 65th birthday was the end of my place in my family's story. Instead, it was the start of a new chapter, one where love wasn't conditional, where truth meant more than appearances, and where being a grandmother meant shielding your grandkids from anyone who would use them as pawns, even their own mother. Tomorrow was Monday, which meant Caleb had soccer and Hazel had danced. Adrian would grab Caleb while Grant took Hazel, and they'd both end up back here for homework and dinner. It was the kind of routine Sloane would have controlled and twisted, but now it flowed naturally from our real care for one another. As I turned off the lights and went upstairs, I thought of the woman who'd tried to erase me from my own family's life. Somewhere out there, Sloane was probably crafting a new identity, writing a new story, finding another family to invade and manipulate. But she'd left behind something she could never take back. The love between people who chose to stand by each other instead of walking away. She'd shown us everything we didn't want to be, and in doing so, helped us become exactly who we were meant to be. For that, if nothing else, I figured I owed her a strange kind of gratitude. But mostly, I just pitied her. She'd had a real family within reach, messy and imperfect, but real. And she tossed it aside for the empty thrill of control. Her mistake, our blessing. And finally, after months of feeling invisible in my own life, I was back where I belonged. This story is based on real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identity of the person involved. It's the story of a mother who gave her entire life to her children and grandchildren, only to be discarded, used, and left behind. But when she had nothing left to lose, she stood up. And this time, she lived for herself. We're not telling this story to judge anyone, but to make people stop and think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? Now I'm curious about you, the one listening to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever gone through something like this? Let me know in the comments. And before you go, I'm leaving 2 of the channel's favorite stories on the end screen. Both will surprise you. Thanks for staying with me until the end.